All right, today we're going to talk about something that's, well, a little like a chain reaction. We're going to deconstruct this cascade of consequences that can happen when public health policy and critical data just don't line up. We're going to trace the path from just one single decision all the way to a ripple effect that can touch an entire population for decades. So, let's dive right in. So, what does actually happen when critical data gets ignored? And look, this isn't just some thought experiment. We're actually going to walk you through a case study here, using real-world data and some pretty sophisticated modeling to draw a straight line from one decision to these massive long-term health consequences. Okay, so where does a story like this even begin? Well, it almost always starts with that first domino tipping over. And in this case, that first domino is a fundamental mismatch between the problem you're facing and the expertise of the person brought in to fix it. So take a look at this. On the left, this is what you'd expect, right? The person leading a communicable disease authority should probably know about things like virology, outbreak modeling, vaccine effectiveness, the basics. But then you look on the right. The actual background here, environmental law. And, maybe most importantly, a history of litigation against regulators. We're talking about two completely different toolkits for two wildly different jobs. And you can actually put a number on that expertise gap. And that number is 0. Seriously. 0 peer-reviewed scientific papers. And that's the gold standard, right? Where other scientists check your work on any of these core topics. Outbreak modeling, how viruses change, how well vaccines work. Now, this isn't about judging someone. It's a stark, measurable number that shows the disconnect between the resume and the reality of the job. So, that first domino, that expertise mismatch, it doesn't just sit there, it tips over. And when it does, it immediately starts to create these ripple effects that you can actually measure in the real world. And I want to be super clear here. This isn't a forecast or a guess. This is what the data actually started showing. And here's the first and honestly most gut-wrenching piece of data. This chart is a direct week-for-week comparison of pediatric flu deaths. Look at that jump. From 3 in the previous season to 17. That's a massive, tragic signal that the whole public health landscape is shifting under our feet. So you have to ask, right? What's behind a number like that? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is this. A 20 percentage point drop in kids getting their flu shots in just 2 years. When you go from 58% of kids protected down to just 38%, you're basically opening up a massive door for the virus, giving it so much more room to run wild. And it's not just that the virus is spreading more, it's that one version of it is becoming king of the hill. This chart is pretty wild. A single strain, H3 subclade K, makes up 92% of all the flu cases they were able to identify. Now, why does that matter? Well, when one strain gets this dominant, it's basically learned how to dodge our best defenses, like vaccines and treatments. It puts a ton of pressure on everything we have to fight it. And this is the really scary part. This isn't just about kids getting sick for a week and then bouncing back. The data shows that for the kids who get sick enough to end up in the ICU, almost 1 in 5 of them, 18%, are leaving the hospital with scarring on their hearts, myocardial scarring. And that's permanent. That's damage they carry with them for the rest of their lives. Okay, so we've looked at what's already happened, the data we can measure right now. But now, let's look forward. Let's talk about what's projected to happen if these trends just keep going. And again, these aren't just wild guesses. These are sophisticated models built on data from past pandemics. They're showing us the next dominoes that are already lined up, ready to fall. First up, the hearts. Remember that permanent heart damage we were just talking about? Well, if you look at the long-term data from the 2009 H1N1 pandemic and apply it here, the models are projecting that the demand for pediatric heart failure clearance is going to double. That's a direct, predictable outcome of what's happening to these kids. And it's not just their hearts. That same kind of post-viral inflammation can scar the lungs too. The projections show that about 15% of the kids who get really sick could end up with a permanent loss in lung capacity. Doctors call it FEV1 loss. But what it really means is a lifetime of maybe feeling just a little bit out of breath, of not being able to quite keep up. But this might be the most terrifying projection of all, the neurological damage. For a very specific, very dangerous brain infection in newborns, something called neonatal HSV meningoencephalitis, the models showed the case fatality rate rocketing back up to 60%. You have to understand that's what it was before we had modern antiviral drugs. It is literally like wiping out decades of medical progress in the blink of an eye. When you put it all together in a table like this, you really see the scale of it. It's not just one organ system taking a hit. We're looking at a cascade of damage across the entire body: cardiac, respiratory, neurological, even things you might not expect, like future clusters of liver cancer or a rise in type 1 diabetes. This isn't just one problem, it's a multi-system crisis just waiting to happen. But believe it or not, the story doesn't even end there with the direct harm to people. There's something even more complex, more insidious happening in the background. The conditions that are being created are actually speeding up how viruses and bacteria evolve. They're rewriting the rules of the game, and in the process, creating brand new threats we haven't even seen yet. The key idea here has a fancy name: segment reassortment. But you can just think of it like viruses shuffling a deck of genetic cards. Every time someone gets sick, it's a new shuffle. And when you have millions and millions of infections, millions of shuffles, the odds go way up that you'll deal a brand new hand. A new flu strain that no one on Earth has ever been exposed to before. One we have zero immunity against. And that is exactly how pandemics start. And if you want to see what this looks like in the real world, well, this polio timeline is just a total gut punch. I mean, for decades, we had this incredible global effort. We were this close to wiping it off the face of the Earth. But then, community immunity starts to fall, and a version of the virus comes back. And the result? The clock gets completely reset, back to square one. It's as if more than 30 years of hard, grueling work just vanished. And this really brings us to the heaviest, most sobering part of this whole story. Some of these consequences, they're permanent. You can change a policy, you can vote in new leaders, but you can't unring a biological bell. There are some lines that once you cross them, you just can't go back. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean. Organ damage a child is born with, that's for life. Viruses that can cause cancer, they can hide in the body for 20, even 30 years, long after everyone has forgotten about the policies that let them spread in the first place. And when a virus evolved to beat one of our drugs, that new ability is baked into its genetics. It's evolutionarily stable. It doesn't just forget how to do it. There's a quote from the source material that just says it all, perfectly. It says, "These biological endpoints cannot be recalled by later legislation. They become part of the population's baseline disease burden for the remainder of the century." Think about what that means. You can't pass a law to fix this. It becomes the new normal, the new baseline of sickness that society has to carry for generations. It's not a problem, it's a legacy. And so that leaves us with this one final, really heavy question. Because, it's one thing to argue about policy and politics. It's a totally different thing to live with the permanent biological fallout. So once a virus has evolved, once a child's heart has been scarred, once a disease we almost beat comes roaring back to life, can we ever truly go back?